Welcome. It's wonderful to see you all. Thanks so much for joining this presentation by Rick Williams with the title, Whose Land Is It? My name is Geraldine Dakota. I'm a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. My tribe is in North Dakota. I co-direct the Toward Right Relationship program with Native peoples with Paula Palmer. Paula and I are joining you from the unceded territory of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations, also known as the Boulder Valley of Colorado. And I'll introduce our speaker in a minute. But first, Paula too is on screen. So Paula, wave your hand so people can see who you are. But first, I'd like to introduce our colleague, Mackenzie Barton Rowledge, who will be handling our tech issues tonight. Mackenzie, would you please say hello?
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Barton-Rutledge. I use ze, here, or she, her pronouns. I live in Seattle, which is Duwamish land, one of the many Coast Salish nations. And I am really delighted to be able to support Rick's presentation tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you, Geraldine.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a few notes before we begin. Please keep your microphones off. So we have a fair number of people on the call, and we're very happy about that, but background noise can be distracting. So we'll thank you for keeping your microphones turned off. We've set up the chat box so that you can only send messages to Paula and to Mackenzie. If you have tech questions, send a chat message to Mackenzie. If you would like to ask a question of Rick during the Q&A that will follow his presentation, please write your questions in the chat box and send it to Paula. She will read through the questions in the chat and address them to Rick. So send tech questions to Mackenzie and questions for Rick to Paula. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Rick, my friend since 1984. Our kids grew up together in the same closely knit Indian education family in Boulder. Richard B. Williams is a citizen of the Oglala Lakota Nation with Cheyenne heritage as well. His long career has been marked with distinction as a leader in Indian education, and he has been sought after as an expert on Indian history, often giving lectures and serving as a consultant, such as for the Discovery Channel's series on how the West was lost. When he retired, Rick was learned to move more about his Cheyenne heritage, and he created a group called People of the Sacred Land, whose groundbreaking research documents the economic impacts of treaty violations and the removal of tribes from Colorado. The loss measures in the trillions. Yes, you heard that right. The resulting report offers a template so similar studies can be done throughout the country that can address the questions: whose land are you living on? At what cost to Native peoples? What could reparations look like? What reparative steps, excuse me, I'm tripping over my words, are non-Native groups already taking? In a corresponding undertaking, Rick is leading another groundbreaking effort to establish an embassy and a culture center in Colorado for the tribes that were forcibly and illegally removed from the state. We begin our program tonight with a land acknowledgement, two actually, with Mackenzie's, but Rick doesn't just want our land acknowledgements. Instead, he asks, there is a lot of injustice that went on. What are you going to do about it? Rick has a proposition for the whole state of Colorado and its 6 million residents. He wants to know, well, let's let Rick tell the story and his vision for the future of the Cheyenne and other tribes and the state of Colorado. It's really a vision for all of us. Rick, my pleasure.
Oh,
Welcome.
Medako Yapi. Greetings, friends and relatives. Um, my Lakota name is Tatanka Huhaska, a tall, long-legged bull buffalo. And like I said, I'm a citizen of the Oglala Lakota Nation, but I am also Cheyenne, both northern and southern. And I'm going to tell you a story that's been um, waiting to be told for a very long time. And I'm really honored to be with you tonight and being able to share this with you. And I hope you enjoy the presentation. Next slide, please. So we began the people of the sacred land primarily because of I wanted to know more about my northern Cheyenne, excuse me, my southern Cheyenne great grandfather, whose name was Whitehorse. And it was because of him that I really got involved in doing the work that we did for to find the truth about American Indians in Colorado. Along the way, one of the questions that you ask is, or people, I hope that they ask, why are there no American Indian reservations on the Eastern Plains or the Front Range of Colorado? And we'll learn about that today. Next slide, please. This story really goes back well before 1800, but we're going to focus on 1834 to the present. And this is a really important, the Indian Trade and Intercourse Act of 1834. Um, this is probably one of the most important historical documents that go back to that time period before the intrusion into Indian country in Colorado. But it became an important part of those all of those discussions. And basically, what the act says is that all of the land east of the Mississippi, up to the Continental Divide, up into Montana, down to where the Treaty of Guadalupe was all deemed to be Indian country. Now, when we think about that term, um, it's an elevation of status for American Indians because typically that would have been determined to be Aboriginal title. But by this designation, it's a congressional title, which has a significantly higher standing in the legal system today. And so this land was all legally Indian land. Next slide. On this slide, you can actually see the area that we're talking about. This also impacted states back east, but not as dramatic as the area in the west. And there's also a very critical piece to this that it plays into almost all of the early dealings with American Indians in this area. Next slide, please. So what this did was it said there's not supposed to be anybody other than Indian nations or traders who've gotten a trading license. Back then, they were very expensive, cost $20,000, or military. Nobody was supposed to be in that red area of land. And if somebody was there and tried to settle, the offender could be arrested and fined $1,000 and was supposed to be removed by the military. And so there was no supposed to be any non-Indians out in this area. Next slide, please. So when you began to look at this area, it was vast, and there were never any real boundaries per se that showed whose land was what within that area in the red. And so there was quite a bit of conflict about that. And also because of the gold rush in 1849, people were moving across the country and they were crossing Indian land, and oftentimes there were the disruptions that they caused additional conflict. So the United States government comes up with this idea to do a treaty, particularly for this area, because you have the Oregon Trail and you got the Smoky Hill Trail coming right through these lands. And so they pass, they create the treaty and they bring everybody together. They sit down, they negotiate a treaty. And next slide. So when we look at Colorado today, this is the orange area on the right side of the map, and the pink area down in the far right corner, and the yellow area were all, or most of it was adjudicated under the Treaty of 1851. And that area that we're looking at, the orange area was the land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho. The yellow areas where they were forcibly removed to in 1861 because of the Fort Wise Treaty. Part of them were moved to that area. And then the pink area down below belonged to the Kiowas, the Comanches, and the Apaches of Oklahoma. Well, next slide, please. Well, the Horse Creek Treaty of 1851 was never, it was never officially affirmed. And what happened was the treaty was supposed to be for 50 years. And when the treaty went to the Senate, and only the Senate dealt with treaties back then, they took out Article 7 and changed it from 50 years to 10 years. And then they sent it to the president for an affirmation. And the president said, did you get the Indians to agree to the amendment from 50 to 10 years? And the answer was no. And so he said, well, you're going to have to do that. So they struggled for years to try to go. They went back out and they tried to get the people back together, and they never were able to fully accomplish getting the signatures that they needed to alter this treaty. And so no president ever signed this treaty. So essentially this treaty was invalid. It didn't really have the standing. And yet people until just a few years ago believed this treaty was a valid document. And I think one of the things that's really critical about this particular treaty is it was used for the basis for the Indian Claims Commission. It was stipulated as the land in the docket that formed the basis for the Indian Claims Commission later on in 1964. Next slide, please. So you have a state of Colorado, and you have people that are coming into the state, and they're not supposed to be there, but there's a desire to you have in 1858 the gold rush into Colorado. People say as many as 100,000 people came into Colorado and along the Front Range. Almost every creek along the Front Range had some gold, and you really have you can understand why they called it a gold rush. But what people didn't understand was that they weren't supposed to be there, and they were on Indian land that Indians had congressional title to. And so when they were trying to figure out what to do about it, so they said, well, let's become a territory. And so they moved forward with the territory. Well, the Organic Act of February 28, 1861, which granted the area to be a territory, had some specific language that nothing in the act was supposed to impair the rights of Indians in the territory. And as long as the land remained unextinguished by treaty, they weren't supposed to, they weren't supposed to be there, and they weren't supposed to be on it. And they needed the consent of the tribal nations. And that never happened. People just came in, and I believe people who've seen this presentation before, I've showed maps of Boulder and Denver where the land was already plotted, and the plots were sold before this was ever possible. So, and the interesting part is in both the Organic Act and then the Enabling Act that created the state of Colorado, they both have similar language, but they're very, they never followed it. They never kept anybody out. And I could not find any evidence that anybody was removed nor anybody was ever fined $1,000. Next slide, please. So what are you going to do if you have a whole bunch of people here that that are coming in the land. They're invading the land and they're here illegally. We have to try to figure out a way to get them out of here. So you create the Treaty of Fort Wise, and you know you're basically dealing with the tribes to try to get the land, get the land titled, transferred via treaty. Well, the Treaty of Fort Wise was one of those interesting documents that the first mistake they made was they when they went to the northern tribes, they told them that they wanted them to come in to sign this treaty, but they wanted them to give up land, and the tribes weren't going to do that, so they never participated. And so um, only the southern Arapahoes and the southern Cheyennes of the upper Arkansas were parties to this agreement. But they knew they needed to have the signatures of the others. So Article 6 was basically saying that if they came in within a year, that they would be provided the benefits of and advantages of this. And nobody came in. The best we could find was one person agreed, came in and signed, but they said he was drunk. And so they never really were able to enforce Article 6, or nothing happened with Article 6 at all regarding the nations that didn't sign. The nations that didn't sign were the Northern Cheyenne and the Northern Arapaho. Now, if you were sitting in downtown Denver and you could see the South Platte, if you followed the South Platte all the way up into the to where it goes up into the Continental Divide, and then if you followed the Continental Divide all the way to Casper, Wyoming, to where the North Platte comes out of Wyoming, all the way down the North Platte through Scottsbluff, Nebraska, all the way out to North Platte, and then the South Platte comes out of Colorado and goes to North Platte. All of that land was not in this treaty, and there was no provisions for people to take it. Next slide, please. The other part about the treaty is anytime you think about treaties, I've learned when I was growing up, I thought a treaty was a good thing. I always thought that, that this was a wonderful relationship between two sovereign governments, and that, we were treating with honesty and distinction, and they were supposed to be the supreme law of the land. And unfortunately, I have a different opinion today. I call treaties the supreme lie of the land instead of the law of the land, because they're just not. I could not find any treaties in Colorado that were that were done in a manner that treated Indian people as sovereign nations and with respect. Here's a perfect example. In the Treaty of Fort Wise, the interpreter for the Arapaho could not speak the language. This was one of the most erudite treaties I've ever read. It's about 3 pages long. It takes a pretty competent person to be able to understand the language of the treaty. And yet, the entire Arapaho Nation were not afforded the ability to even understand what was going on in these discussions. Article 6 was never completed. And like I said, there's no signatures authorizing the ceding of the land north and south at the plot. 23 million acres of land. That's what we're talking about today, is 23 million acres of land never legally being ceded to the United States government. What makes it even more interesting is Article 11, which said the property in Denver and surrounding cities were going to be able to buy, pay for the land that they were on at $1.25 an acre. The unusual thing about this is that there were 66 towns, including Denver and Boulder, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, that were all land was already all assigned within the city limits and sold illegally. And so there was never that they never did really satisfy that. And the other unusual thing about that is even though it was taken, I could find no information about compensation for the land that was taken. I looked at every one of the Indian Appropriations Acts that followed these transactions, and there was never any compensation for the taking of this land. Um, and then the other part was, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, the process of signing the amendment where they decided in Article 11 that they were just going to take that out and not even have the Indian people sign it. Next slide, please. So here's a good map where you can see the lighter gray area was the original land, and then in the little bitty dark area, that's where they were moved to, and there was no water, and there were very few buffalo. The buffalo herds would have been congregating up by the South Platte, between the South Platte and the Republican River, along the Smoky Hills. And so, this was a loss for the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. Next slide, please. So one of the things that you think is, okay, so they do this, and they don't get the signatures. Um, but so what do they do about it? They, the sad part is they knew that they didn't have the signatures. They knew that they didn't legally take this land. And they were, even in the report from the Commissioner of Indian Affairs, another disturbing element consists in the fact that one or two of the bands were not represented at the making of the recent treaty with the Cheyenne and Arapahoes, who consistently still claim the right to roam throughout the territory once claimed by that nation. Well, that was because they didn't come in inside. There was provisions to try to get them in, and that never happened. And next slide. So you're having this. What this is this is correspondence between Territorial Governor Evans, who was also the Superintendent of Indian Affairs, and Dole, who was the Indian Commissioner, and they're talking about how they should make arrangements to have them come in and sign a treaty, and make it a good agreement. Well, um, this never happened. Even again, this is the evidence that shows they knew that they hadn't legally acquired that land. And next slide. So this one here talks about the same thing. They mention in here the official opinion that I gave about the survey was not expected to interfere with the department. Okay, so now we're up to 1863, and this young man who was assistant district attorney, his last name was Brown, and he had a conscience, and he was surveying the land. And when he got to the Platte River, um, he said, "I can't go across the Platte River and survey any of that land because we don't own it. We don't have title to that land." And it almost got him killed. He published a note in Rocky Mountain News, and they almost killed him for it because everybody believed that they owned that land, or they were that was their. So, but these are just the kinds of evidence that I had 8 researchers helping me, and we dug deep to find this stuff because one of the things that we learned in this process is the history of American Indians in Colorado was kept a secret, and it was a deep, dark secret for 100 years. And in 1964, the Colorado History magazine published about 7 articles on the Sand Creek Massacre. And a lot of the information, a lot of the source for us, for our researchers, was to go back and look at those documents, but then look at the footnotes in those documents to begin finding the evidence, like these letters that show that they knew what they were doing when they were covering it all up. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the one where Article 11, in consideration of the kind treatment of the Arapaho and the Cheyenne by the citizens of the Denver city and adjacent towns, be permitted to the United States government to enter into sufficient quantity of land to include the city and towns at a minimum price of $1.25. Next slide. So that went to they took that out of the treaty. The treaty went to the State Department, and the State Department said, "Whoa, wait a minute. Did you get permission from the Indians to put that article in there?" And I also suspect that perhaps somebody realized that the federal government is the only people that can transact land actions with American Indians, and by giving that authority to the state, it was probably illegal. But the State Department comes in and says, "Whoa, wait a minute. You better get these people back together because this is an illegal document the way it is. It's not gonna go forward." So you know, they knew and they needed to do something about it. Next slide. So what do? They say, "Well, we're going to get all the Indians back together, right? We're going to bring them back together." And they concoct these drafts and these written documents. They ask the people. Let's go to the next slide real quick. I think that's one of the ones that, how about one more up? Okay, so in the Rocky, and we're going to go back to those other ones. So the following was in the Rocky Mountain News, September 11th, 1861. A messenger arrived from Fort Wise with the report that there were 1,000 Indians collected around the post and becoming very clamorous for their annuities. Many were suffering from hunger, and the commanding officer had already distributed some provisions among them. Some were threatening the fort, which was a feeble garrison. Now, later on, so down below it says, the reported attack was unfounded and it was just nonsense. So the government tells people to come in September 11th or around September 9th. They don't show up for 2 weeks after that. And then the annuities don't show up for 2 weeks after that. And so the possibility of people having to stay around there with nothing to eat, and the fact that it's moving towards the fall and they have to be out on their buffalo hunts in order to acquire the food for the winter, and the people are nervous about being there. Let's go back 2 slides. So when I looked at these documents, I found something very strange about them. The documents, first of all, there's clear erasures and new information put in. So the date 29th day of October 1861 was it, I don't know what the original date was, but this was erased and that was put in there. But more alarming was that the names, none of the names of the people who originally signed the treaty show up in this amendment. Now, how can you have a contract with a group of people who sign a document and not have any of them be party to the amendment? Almost impossible. So I suspect that there was some subterfuge here, but it even gets worse. Next page. So this eventually gets done. The treaty gets done, and it gets sent to Washington. The 5th day of December, it gets there. The president signs it, and everybody thinks everything's okay. And I'm going to make a comment here, and then I'm going to go back. I think we'll see some more on the next one. One of the things that puzzled me was, why was it so important that they get this treaty done in such a rush? And you have to be pretty knowledgeable about history to recognize that this is December 1861. In 1862, Congress passes the Settlement Act, the Railroad Act, the School Fund Act, the Church Act, and the Land Grant, the Morrill Act. The United States government needed land, and it needed a lot of land to fulfill its obligations under those acts. And so it seems to me that they really pushed this through because they knew they were going to be doing that the next year. Next slide, please. We'll go one more. Okay, so this is the interesting part. When you see the original documents about treaties, there's always X's after somebody's name to show that they mark an X to show that they signed it. And so you can see the X's on this one. Let's go to the next slide. However, in this document, they forgot to get the X's in the original document. So they go in, they erase everything, and they come back in and say, well, we got to put something in there. So they put plus signs in there. You look at it, they're plus signs now. So how is that possible? And it's because they cut and paste the plus marks in there. We had a cartographer look at each one of the plus marks, and they said whoever wrote the first one wrote them all. So this was a complete forgery, just outright forgery of a document, and should have invalidated the treaty. Next slide, please. So Denver's illegally occupied. First of all, there's the violation of the 1834 Trade and Intercourse Act. Denver was founded in 1858. Created the town lots were being sold, and this actually comes out of an article from the People's History magazine that talks about what was going on and has the maps and shows everything. And this was the one that really sealed the deal. One big problem: neither town company had title to the land they were selling. The solution was a congressional grant of 1864, which conveyed to Denver and those who had acquired lots in the city clear title and land within a 960-acre 1 by 1.5 million rectangle of land encompassing most of the original area and Denver city town plats. So remember when I talked about that Congress had or the Senate had altered it, and so when they got the amendment back, they believed that they had the legal right to go ahead and go forward with assigning and selling the lots, and they did. But now there's no record of who bought the lots or how they were sold or what the title is. And like I said, there was no compensation. Again, they knew what they were doing, and there was subterfuge. Next slide, please. So this actually shows the Denver city maps of the land that was taken and how it was taken. You can see the Platte River. Both sides of the Platte River were deeded, and it was all illegal. Next slide, please. Denver's boundaries under the Act of 1864. You can see Colfax Avenue in there. So again, these are the kinds of things when we were looking for, how this happened. These are the kinds of things we began to find on a regular basis. Next slide, please. So it is to be remembered that while we were considering the affairs of these town companies, that none of them had any valid title to the soil on which their operations were carried forward. All of them were merely squatters on the land to which the Indians had first claim under the conditions then existing. It's, this is the kind of thing that's shocking. This is the kind of things when, when you're doing this kind of research and you find documents like this and you find the fraud that went on, it's shocking. And remember I said that they kept all of this stuff a secret for 100 years? There's reasons for it. In the country between 1860, in the United States between 1860 and 1870, about 72, there was the greatest amount of fraud in Indian country at any time in the history of interactions with the nations. This was partly due during Lincoln's administration. There's a book out there called Lincoln and the Indians that chronicles all of the fraud that went on. I'm not making this stuff up. It's already been documented. It's there. If you want to read it, it's called Lincoln and the Indians, and it tells us that the story of the fraud. Next slide, please. Well, to make matters worse, they're settling the land, they're selling the land, but they still have this problem with they haven't managed to figure out how they're going to get rid of the Indians. Indians are still trying to occupy their land. And contrary to popular history about Indians, there was that was significantly distorted. So we did an analysis, and we did an incident report, and identified every white person that was killed in Colorado from 1848 to 1878, and there were 204 people killed by Indians. Correspondingly, the same time period, 710 Indians were killed. So when you think about statistics like that, and you think about what we learned about the history of Colorado, these peaceful settlers coming in and settling the land, and and they were being attacked by these brutal savages, it's a distorted reality. The truth is that you had Indian people living here in their homeland, and there was an invasion into their territory, and they were trying to defend it. And the number of times there were massacres by Indian people in between 1860 and 1875 is just horrendous. But they know there's a problem, right? So Governor Evans recognized this as this. So he says any Indian in Colorado, you have to go to Sand Creek. And if you don't go to Sand Creek, then you're going to be deemed hostile, and we're going to declare war. We're declaring war on you. This is an illegal act of war. He did not have a territorial governor, does not have the authority to declare war on a people, but he does in this, and that's what this proclamation does. Next slide, please. Well, that didn't work, right? So he wasn't able to convince Indians to go to Sand Creek. So what does he do next? He says a proclamation authorizing all citizens of Colorado, either individually or in such parties as they may organize, to go in pursuit of all hostile Indians on the plains, scrupulously avoiding those who've responded to my said call to rendezvous at the points indicated, also to kill and destroy his enemies. And then as compensation for this, you get to take their property. That's shocking. That's shocking to know that a territorial governor issues a proclamation to kill the people who are inhabiting the land legally, and they're there illegally. To make matters worse, if they could be worse, these really are the prelude to Sand Creek. He's got the people moved down to Sand Creek. He's got them where he wants them. The rest of them, they're still fighting. And next slide, please. You have this continued genocide, and then you have the Sand Creek Massacre. and that didn't have to happen because in September of that year, September 29th, 1864, a whole group of American Indians came into Denver to negotiate a peace. And Evans turned them away, wouldn't even talk to him, turned them away and said, "You get out of here. We're done with you. We're gonna kill you. We're gonna exterminate you." And 2 months later, you have the Sand Creek Massacre. Um, and in a very few short years, all of the Indian nations were gone from their homeland in the Front Range, and they some were moved north, others were relocated to Oklahoma. The ones so in 1867, 68, they had the final treaties, which removed everybody from the central part of the plains, from the southern border of South Dakota to the northern border of Oklahoma. There were not going to be any Indians allowed in that area. The ones who were in the north, today, if you look at the Missouri River, you'll see at the very top, you have the Mandan, that's in a Rickarraw. You come down south of that, you have the Standing Rock Reservation and the Cheyenne River Reservation, and then the Crow Creek, Lower Brule, Philandrew, Santee, Omaha, Winnebago. So all of the Indian people in the central part of the United States were forcibly removed to the Missouri River. Now, the only reason Pine Ridge and Rosebud, they actually were supposed to be there. They built buildings there and they were supposed to move there. But Spotted Tail was considered a friendly, and he talked his way out of it. Red Cloud went to Washington, D.C. and threw a fit in Washington, D.C. and got the Association of American Indian Affairs to act in his behalf. And they said the people from Pine Ridge didn't have to move to the river. So that's the story, when you think about what I said, that question, why are there no Indians on the eastern plains of Colorado? It's pretty clear what was going on. It's not, I know it's disturbing. I know it's hard to believe that the ancestors of the people here in Colorado could create such havoc. And I don't talk I don't talk a lot. I didn't do a lot of research. I did do a lot of research on Sand Creek, but I didn't publish any of it because I was asked not to by the Southern Cheyennes and Southern Arapahoes because it hurts so much. It's painful. It's painful to know what happened to your relatives. Only this last year that I learned that I had 4 relatives. I'm a descendant of the people at Sand Creek, and that made it worse for me. And the story is out there. There's a book that has all of the testimony about what happened, and it's gruesome. It's the most horrific display of inhumanity that's ever existed in North America, and that's the stuff they were covering up. When I say they were covering up, you think about Evans. Yeah, he got, he was, you know, fired from being the governor. He was indicted, but he was never convicted. 3 years later, he becomes a railroad baron and becomes famous in Colorado. If you look at the history of right after the Sand Creek Massacre and the 20 years after that, you see books written, but they don't say the Sand Creek Massacre. They say the Sand Creek Battle. And what they did was the propaganda was these Indians had it coming. We needed to destroy these Indians because they were so horrible to us. And that's how the history got changed. That's why they kept it secret. And because of all of these things, Evans becomes a hero and named streets after him, Shivington towns, Mount Blue Sky. Fortunately, we got that changed. But this is a sad, sad story about the truth not being told. You're not going to see anything in any of the schools about the kinds of things that we discovered. The history of Indian people in Colorado has been covered up. And had it not been for this wonderful historian by the name of William Unruh in 1964, he wrote an article called Prelude to War. If he hadn't written that, I would have never been able to find out the information that we found out in where to look for in our reports. And then the other one, I think for that, and you would have thought that after 64 there would have been more information out there, but until 1981, Margaret Cole of Boulder wrote Chief Left Hand, and that's the next time when the information becomes available. If you want to read a really good book about what was happening in this part from she does a wonderful job. The other book that I recommend is uh, Gary Roberts, Massacre at Sand Creek, How the Methodists Were Involved. He's a great author. Unfortunately, he's got a dissertation that is awesome. It's 1,000 pages long, 200 pages of footnotes, and the man is a brilliant historian, writer. He looks at things from a 360-degree point of view, and he doesn't take favorites. He doesn't, you're going to read the truth, and you're going to read it from a non-Indian point of view, but it's the truth, and he tells it like it is. Next slide, please. So we have in 1864 to 1964, we have all this stuff going on. Little is written, there's 11 articles, and you have the Prelude to War. Here in Colorado, you have what's going on is you got determinations of Indian nations. So people are being relocated to Denver. Forced assimilation becomes more active. 60s relocation to Indians to Denver and Boulder. We have a growing population of people. Our history is having people here is there's a lot, and there's a real fascinating stories about the people who were relocated here. Next slide, please. So the question you ask, if they stole the land, how did they steal it? Took me 3 years to find it. I looked in every document, I looked in everything, and I could not find anything, any treaty, any type of appropriation act, any type of anything that could have, even at later treaties, at how this land was stolen. And what they did was, so after Sand Creek, they took the people that were still living, and in Kansas they created another treaty called the Treaty of the Little Arkansas River of 1865. And this was only with the Southern Cheyenne and Southern Arapaho. These were the survivors of Sand Creek, and they have reparations in there. They have an amendment. That's how I found out. I had relatives that were there. And lo and behold, in Article 2, in very small print, they lay out the description of the land north of the South Platte, and they include it in this treaty. And the Southerners sign it, but they don't have any authority to give that land away. So today we have a situation where we have 23 million acres of land that was never legally taken by the United States government. There was significant subterfuge and fraud that led to this, and it's been kept a secret until we accidentally just stumble on it and do the deep dives and have found irrefutable evidence that it happened. And so we've got a challenge going forward. We don't know what to do. We're studying the situation. We're working with the tribes to have them understand the impact of what this means. And there's some. Let's go to the next slide. So before I get to this slide, I just want to say, uh, one of the things, so of course, one of the things that you can do is you can start the litigation and try to go into the courts, and it would be very expensive. Estimates between 30 and $50 million to file a lawsuit of this nature. There would be a neighborhood of, I don't know, 150, 200,000 titles that would be clouded in this area. And it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to carry on for a long time. And a lot of people could get hurt. And I don't think that, I can't speak for the tribes, but I don't think that's not what they want. They don't want to be hurting people. They don't want to take somebody's private home away from them or cause them to have a lien against their house. And that's not what, I don't think that's what, but I suggested this, and it seems to be, something that people can recognize as being a possibility. And that was, what if going forward, in Colorado, the state legislature passes a bill that authorizes a 1.5% fee on all future real estate transactions in the state of Colorado. And that money could go back to those nations to be used here in Colorado to help them reestablish themselves in their homeland. What if that could happen? Well, there's a number of church groups have gotten together, and their congregations in the diocese are talking about it, and they want to move forward with something like this. And when they asked me about it, I said, I think it's a great idea, but I can't do it because I'm a one-person operation right now. But you guys could. And so they're taking it upon themselves to have discussions about every time there's church property sold in Colorado, 1.5%, or 1.5% of the sales price will go into a pool of funds, and that could be used for supporting the efforts of relocating the people home. Now, others have even taken it a little bit further and said, well, what about all our parishioners? What if they sell land? Couldn't they put up, 1.5% into this pool? And one brave pastor said, well, why can't all of our people in our congregation pay $25 a month back rent, into this pool? Wouldn't that be justice? And so there's some possibilities that we won't have to do a lawsuit, but I don't know. That's not in my hands. I can't, I can only provide the truth and documentation about it. But here's the good news, or we think it's going to be good news. The people are coming home. I went to Oklahoma this last week, and I visited with 4 of the nations down there: the Comanches, the Kiowas, the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and the Apaches of Oklahoma, and told them that next week there's going to be a vote. The Denver Vibrant Bond, November 4th, is going to be voted on. And in that bond is a provision for $20 million to build an embassy and a cultural center somewhere in Colorado. If that passes, all of those nations we visited, and others have indicated they want to come home. They want to have a legal place, a place to establish coming home. And it just makes me, it gives me chills to think about that, because you think about, for 160 years they've been gone, and now they're going to have a presence back in their homeland. And I think everybody in Colorado should be applauding that, and helping that happen. And next slide, please. Questions. I think Geraldine is going to be handling the questions, or Paula.
Yeah, Paula's gonna, so here's how, are you done, Rick? I don't want to cut you
Oh, I'm
short.
done.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, my head is just swimming. Um, so the way we're going to do this is, please write your questions in the chat and send them to Paula. Are there already some questions there, Paula?
Yes, I have three questions. Geraldine, I didn't know if you wanted to address a question to Rick first or
Well, you
not.
know, Rick kind of answered the question I had, which was about the embassy and his recent visit, very recent, last week, to Oklahoma to visit the four tribes he mentioned and, you know, what their reaction was. So he sort of touched on that. Um, yeah, it's always important when we try to do things in Colorado or anywhere on behalf of tribes, and we find out what they feel like about it, how they, you know, what they want. It just strikes me how different the conversation is, Rick, and Paula and everyone. A lot of you on the screen, a lot of you who've joined us have heard many, many presentations about Native Americans by now. And the conversation has changed so much. And I really think a lot of people in Colorado have worked really hard to build relationships with the tribes, especially the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, and bringing in other tribes, the Utes. And like Rick said, there's 48 tribes who called Colorado home, or what's now Colorado. The conversation has shifted. So it's really, it gives me chills too, Rick, to feel this movement. And I feel like we're kind of in a flowing river, and we couldn't even stop it now if we wanted to, which of course we don't. So there's some real momentum. But I want to let Paula go ahead and we can start addressing your questions and get the most out of Rick's time that we can tonight.
Okay, well, one question is very specific. It's has to do with the settlers, Rick, that you mentioned, who bought land in Denver and Boulder illegally after those towns were illegally founded before 1864. And the question was, who did they pay for that land? Did they buy that from the federal government? Or who sold that land and made the money on these illegal transactions?
Essentially, what the Congressional Act of 1864 did was give everybody who had title to land, just gave it to them without any compensation. That's hard to do. I know it's hard. That's what um there there was no the act. If you read the act, that's what it says is they issue a title to whoever has it, and they certify it.
Wow. Well, somebody made some money. Um, Another question, from someone in Colorado who has read or heard that there was a massacre of Native people in the town that is called Niwot, which is near Boulder. Is that something that you have also heard or not?
Um, I've never heard of a massacre in Niwot, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Um, and we probably would we in Colorado and especially Boulder would have known that, I think, if it had happened, because remember the relationships were friendly and interactive with each other until the gold rush, and then there was quite a bit of there was quite a bit of information. There were newspapers after that, so there was a lot of information that would have probably stuck out as something that people would have, said about. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there weren't massacres along the Front Range and out onto the plains, because I think that I counted 7 different massacres of Cheyenne people. Um, after 1860, up to about 1875. So there were massacres, but I don't remember any right in Niwater, the Front Range.
Okay. Um, about your, the reports that were, the research that was done by, that was sponsored by people of the sacred land, what are called the Trek reports. Can you give a quick summary? Geraldine is holding up one of those documents. There's another document that relates to education in the state of Colorado. But Rick, can you give a summary of what you learned about the financial losses, um, the estimates that you were able to arrive at of the financial losses to the tribes who were removed from the state of Colorado and whose treaties with the federal government, the government violated?
So there's actually a third book. If you go on our website, People of the Sacred Land, there's a historical, it's called the Historical Loss Assessments. And in that book, it outlines the specific losses from the time of the taking and then what the value would be today. And just that land that we're talking about that was unceded was estimated to have a value of $1 trillion. Um, it's hard to calculate what they didn't do a good job of calculating what the invasion, meaning the people coming here and not being removed, would have had. But then for another example is the destruction of the buffalo. The largest buffalo herd still existed in the state of Colorado, and there was about 5 million at the time when that started. All that the estimate is today would be that herd and value would be at $56 billion. And if you go online, you can go into each one of the reports. They'll show you exactly the kinds of losses that took place, mineral rights, loss of life, all of it is in that portion of the document. And then from those documents, the overall report, we make recommendations for restoration, how to do restorative justice, knowing those kinds of situations existed. And we are very much advocating the restoration of buffalo in Colorado. I think it would be good from a sustainable food source, second to none.
And that leads nicely into another question that came up, which is if people would like to support your work, the continuing work of the people of the sacred land, is there an address that you could give for people to make donations?
Yes, our website is peopleofthesacredland.org, and there's a donation place on the website if they choose to support our work.
Good. I'm glad that that question came up and that you had a ready answer to it. Um, Here is, let's see, another question. Yeah, you mentioned a proposal that 1.5% of the sale value of transactions, land transactions could go toward, and the question is what? How would that money, which would be a considerable amount of money, how would that money be directed?
Okay, so my estimate is that in 2023, 1.5% of all real estate transactions in Colorado would generate about $80 million. And if we did that in perpetuity, we would have a sustainable fund so that the way it would work is if we go back to that map that shows the treaty land in the state of Colorado, whenever a piece of property was sold in those treaty areas, that would go into the pool of resources, and it would probably be held by another entity that would manage the distribution Um, um, I think it's the next map, it's the state, yeah, that one, okay. So wherever the land was, that money would go back to those tribes. But there's also, there's suggestions that part of those resources would be used to sustain, um, people who are living here in Colorado already, tribal members and other members that, are having different difficult economic situations would also be able to get some access. So like the Denver Indian Center would be supported by that. And
Mhm.
most likely the cultural center at the embassy will be supported by, could be supported by, but primarily the money would go back to the tribes. And it's my sense, and I don't, it's my opinion that that money should be used in Colorado rather than going back to where they were from, but use it to help them reestablish themselves in Colorado. But that's not a given. That's my suggestion.
And another question about that, those proposals for what could happen here in the state of Colorado. Are there agencies or departments or individuals within the Colorado state government that are supportive of these ideas and that might be able to actually um, turn them from ideas into actions?
Well, we have one with the city and county of Denver. I mean, they stepped up big time, and there's a councilwoman, Stacy Gilmore. She's an angel. She single-handedly brought that thing before the city and council. She read the report and she said, "This is wrong. We can do something about it. And what do you want to do?" And I said, "Let's get him back. Let's do this an embassy." And she said, "We can do it." So there are, individuals within these departments that are, but nothing, nothing official from the state, or from the federal government about doing any kind of restorative justice. And I think those negotiations have to take place. For example, there's no reason why, the tribes, if when they come back, that they couldn't be engaging in a co-management agreement with the Arsenal buffalo herd, and at the same time, the Eagle Repository, having tribal involvement in a relationship with those, taking, learning to manage those and create greater assets. I think with the Eagle Repository, it makes great sense because then you'll have Indian people who know how to treat those eagle feathers, and I think that it lend tremendous, lend quite a bit of wisdom and knowledge and sanctity to that process. And that's not to say that you don't look beyond that. I think you could look beyond to the Pawnee National Grasslands. You can look to the Comanche National Grasslands and begin starting, restoration of buffalo herds in those areas. Yeah, again, you have to be real careful and not try to disturb existing, families, and but it's endless because if you think about all of the federal and state land in Colorado, should be, um, there should be some consideration about, you know how do they accommodate people to come back. I mean, and that's one of the things that I say is, um, you did that to us. You put us in this position, and you're expecting us to dig ourselves out of our grave. But you did that to us. When are you going to step up and make amends? When are you going to step up and make it happen instead of us having to fight for it and argue for it? Um, it's we didn't commit the wrongs. So there's some culpability that has to be, um, they have to step up and help us because we can't do it alone. And we need everybody who's on today. We're going to need all of you when the time comes for the legislation to go forward. If it goes forward, we're going to need everybody's supports. I'm really proud of the Christian congregations in Colorado for stepping up and saying, we're going to do something about this. We realize there's a wrong. And that makes me really proud to know that, um, you know, and in a lot of ways, dealing with the truth and the healing, that's the only way it's really going to happen is when we can get beyond it and we have, you know, um, one of the things I oppose is the 150, 250 celebrations because it's really difficult for us to celebrate anything. But would it be wonderful if 50 years from now, people look back on this time and say, wow, you know, those people really were conscientious about what they were doing and they really did the right thing to help Indian people come back to their homeland. That would be so beautiful. Yeah, well, I dream about that. I dream about that happening, that, you know, people are going to be welcoming our people back in a good way.
There's a question about how, what's it like to be trying to work with multiple tribes? What kind of communications are there among the different tribes? What issues come up when different tribes try to put something together um, as a collective?
Well, I think you're always going to have issues with relationships, and particularly that haven't been strengthened or developed over a long period of time. You look at the two Ute tribes here in Colorado, they've developed a wonderful relationship with the state and the state legislature, and they could get a lot of things done. And we're going to be bringing in, other tribes into that equation. And I'm sure that there's going to be problems. I'm sure there's going to be things, but I think we can work them out. I mean, it's if you do things in a good way with a good heart, and I think, good things will happen. And I think we can overcome those.
I'm just reading through a few more questions here. One question was, are there materials for younger readers, younger children?
Yes, there are. On our
Yeah. What do you suggest for people who are either teachers or parents working with younger children?
It just so happens that on our website, there are curriculums available for third and fourth graders, middle school, and most recently we added the high school curriculum. So if teachers and educators and children want to go in and take a look at that, I think it's a pretty good curriculum. It was developed by Leah Hauser from the Friends School, and it's people who are using it love it. And so it's there. Good question, though. I'm glad to see that because, it isn't just about educating our people about our history. It's about, I think it's important for everybody to know the history of Colorado and how things evolved over time, and good or bad. I mean, I think I'm a big advocate of education, so I would encourage it.
And I want to just remind people of your website, peopleofthesacredland.org. So those resources are available at peopleofthesacredland.org. And a question here about what barriers you may have encountered, Rick, as you have tried to share the research that you've done and spread the ideas that you keep generating. Have you come across barriers, and how have you dealt with those?
That's the thing. The shocking thing for me was we were very careful about how we released our report and when we released it. And I expected quite a bit of pushback. It's been out there almost a year and 5 months. The material's been out there. And I have not had a single negative comment. a single anybody questioning the validity of the research. Um, I, I was shocked because I thought we would be up against barriers of, people saying, well, you know, this is critical race theory, and my response back was that, if that with I prepared a response, and I would say this is critical truth reality, because it's the truth, and you know I don't, so I'm shocked. Other than having the first barrier was, the government, state of Colorado, didn't want to do it, and so we had to go out and raise money to do it. So we used all private sources to do this, and I think that that was a barrier. It's continuing to be a barrier. I don't know how long a nonprofit like ours can stay in business, and and I'm getting old. I mean, that's the other barrier, is age.
Well, we know that younger people have been part of the work that you've been doing also, Rick. And so we know that there are young people who are going to have long careers and many opportunities to carry forward some of the visions that you have put in all of our minds.
And I have to congratulate you guys. Look what you're doing with those language camps, and you're bringing the youth back to their homeland and giving them opportunities to see the beauty of this place. And you guys are doing a great job, and educating, providing these seminars, and I think that's um, you guys rank up there in my angel list too. So thank you.
Rick is referring to some of the work that Right Relationship Boulder has been doing, especially with the Arapaho and Cheyenne people. So for those of you who are not in this Boulder, Colorado area, you might want to look at rightrelationshipboulder.org to see some of those some of those collaborations between Arapaho Cheyenne people, local indigenous people, and Right Relationship Boulder. Geraldine, we're getting about toward the end of our time. Do you want to
Right.
take it from here?
Sure. My God. Yeah, we do want you to stick around for the rest of the time. We still have some things to do. But first of all, a huge, huge, huge thank you to Rick for taking us, pointing us in the direction and helping us along, thinking beyond land acknowledgements and to land back. So thank you, Rick. And thank you all the participants for giving us your time tonight to share in this presentation and to ask your questions and help all of us. We have so many people on this screen who have been so integral to the work that we're doing in Colorado. They're anonymous, but they're not anonymous to Paula and Rick and I. We know who you are. We so appreciate you. Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is allow you to have an opportunity as a participant to just give a little bit of feedback and respond to a query in the chat box. So Mackenzie's going to allow all to send chat messages to everyone this time. So that before we close, we'd like to ask you to answer. The question is, what's an important takeaway for you from this program? And if you'd put that answer in the chat, everyone will be able to see them and read them, and we'll take a little time to read through the responses. So what is an important takeaway for you from this program? We'll give you a minute to do that. Are these just going to appear, Mackenzie? Or do I need to
Yeah.
get into the chat to see it?
You may need to open the chat, and chat Zoom just recently redid their chat, so you have to click on the everyone in the
Okay.
different options of which chat you're in. you can
Okay.
find yourself accidentally in different chats. So we're hoping people will respond to everyone.
Okay, and there's the query in the chat. What is an important takeaway for you from this program today? Probably all hungry. Implementing the real estate transaction fee. The importance of reparation. This is news to me. Thanks. I gave a small donation. Keep up the good work. Creativity and how relationships are repaired and how healing happens. I'm not from Colorado, but I've never heard about the 1.5% real estate fee. That's a bearable payback option. Everything begins with building relationships and the ability to call people in instead of calling them out. We can't change the past, but there's hope for our future. I didn't know the history of this land in Colorado cities was sold or titled to private people illegally. So many good observations and comments. I don't know if we're saving the chat. Are we, Mackenzie?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and reactions to what's been offered tonight. Yeah, I don't know, Rick, are we the only state doing this? Is there precedent for this whole real estate fee idea? I wanted to ask you that.
The idea was it the Inland 10-Year Foundation in Minnesota got a hold of the idea, and it was moved forward in Minnesota, but there were 14 nations there, and they never could agree upon how it should be implemented, so it never happened.
Because those Chippewa nations can't get along with each other. You know, there's the Minnesota Chippewa tribes, and there's, about 11 of them. So, but it's a concept that has to be planted, and then people can start to think about the way that it can happen. Because I think in my mind, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, wow, sure, right? And people are thinking about it, and people want to do the right thing, and nobody wants to give up their property, and nobody's going to ask anybody to do that. But to offer a way to, to make some positive step forward with a real estate tax, I think it's almost a relief for people to think, oh gosh, yeah, there are ways that we can live together in a better way in this land. So how much time we have left? So before we close, there's a couple more things. Mackenzie's in the chat. Mackenzie's going to post registration links for our next TRR, Toward Right Relationship, online presentations, programs in November and December. So now we want to let you know that our next TRR with Native Peoples workshop and our November, December webinars, there are going to be links to those registration. And of course, you can find those too at Toward Right Relationship website. So our next Toward Right Relationship workshop will be on Saturday, November 16th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And our November webinar will be offered by Sweetwater Nanook, who is Tlingit, Haida, and Simeon, with the title Decolonizing Our Activism, The Seventh Fire, How to Be a Good Ally. And the date for that is Saturday, November the 8th, from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And our December webinar will be presented by Native Hawaiians, and I sure hope I get these names right, Kumuleao and Hunani Singh. They will give an overview of Native Hawaiian history and the Movement for Native Hawaiian Rights Today. The date for that is December 4th, which is a Thursday, from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It's always a challenge to find a time that works across the country, but we sure do hope you'll join us for these programs, and please copy the links in the chat if that's helpful to you. And now, before we close, we would really appreciate it if you would fill out a brief evaluation form. Again, Mackenzie will post a link to the form in the chat. Please click on the link and fill out the form before you leave. It will only take a minute or two. And thank you for coming tonight, and we hope that we will see you again soon. So look in that chat for the link to the evaluation form. We really do need those evaluations. We read every one, we take every one of them seriously and take a lot of advice that we get in them.
And just so you all know, everyone who registered, I'll be sending all the stuff I put in the chat, and an anonymized version of what you all wrote in the chat, to you all in the next week or so. So, I believe as well as the recording, we're gonna have that sent out as well.
And one more big thanks to Rick Williams. Rick is a treasure for those of us who live here on the Front Range of Colorado, and we really appreciate you joining us tonight, Rick.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone who's attending, and my heart's with you, and just keep believing, because we can make it happen.